Okay.
I wanted to
What
ask
ruined
you, here's a question
Blizzard?
that I had in myself.
God,
And
I
I was
can't
trying
wait.
to answer it through your book, and I wanted to know what your take on it is, which is when, if you had to pick the year it peaked and started to fall, when did it start? When did Blizzard really, the decline begin? My answer from my own experience and also from reading your book would have been Heroes of the Storm, which is like this first big public failure, which I think is the first time I ever saw as like an outside gamer that I saw this game is not good enough. It's not Blizzard level. It felt off. Heroes of the Storm was like the first time I saw it fall. But I wanted to know what your take was.
Yeah, Heroes of the Storm was so bad.
Employees say, and when do you think it really felt like, oh, we're not
The thing is,
anymore?
right?
Okay, so
I don't think that's where the decline started, right? I feel like it would have just. I feel like that's where it's visible, right? But the decline obviously started before that, right? Was that after Overwatch? What's the Blizzard game timeline? So it's like 1993 Lost Vikings, 94 Warcraft Orcs and Humans, 95 Tides of Darkness. That was a banging game. I love that shit. Warcraft 2 Beyond the Dark Portal. And then we got Diablo in 97. Brood War in 98. StarCraft in 98 as well. It wasn't even that far between StarCraft and Brood War. They must have had it mostly done. Diablo 2 in 2000. Lord of Destruction 2001. Frozen Warcraft 3 2002. Frozen Throne 2003. I think this is all still bangers, right? Warcraft, WoW, obviously, clearly a banger, 2004. Burning Crusade 2007. And then Wrath of the Lich King was 2008. Now, I believe Activision took over at some point here. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can someone look up the date that Activision took over? July 2008. So a lot of the stuff of Wrath was already done by then. It shipped in November 2008. I think we got the beta in like 2 or 3 months before for Wrath. Because I remember playing it. I did the whole thing, leveled all the way up in the beta. So I knew what to do. So I remember playing that. And I think that was probably around 3 months before we got the beta, right? So July to November. It's very shortly before the beta actually dropped. So most of it would have been done. I guess a few things like decision making on certain things would have been changed, and then some later stuff in the expansion, you know, the later patches, the later raids, stuff like that would have been more influenced by it, I guess. But like you could already kind of feel it towards the end of Wrath, where there were certain things that were like not low, well, maybe a little bit lower quality, but also the game started to feel less raw. You know, there was more quality of life stuff coming in terms of like from a design perspective, like things started to become easier and clearly more aimed at the general sort of gaming audience, as opposed to them just trying to make a game that they thought was really good, right? And then they loved. And you couldn't really put your finger on it back then. You didn't really know back then, but there were aspects of it that were a bit like, not too sure about this. Like, okay, we'll do it, but like maybe this was just a blip kind of thing. You know, people were complaining about stuff. I think you got the dungeon finder thing. You like auto tallying to dungeons. I think that came in then. Just shit like that. There was Talk. Talk was a bit of a wishy-washy raid. So yeah, you could kind of feel it there, right? And then Kata, obviously, a lot of people quit during Kata. Kata was like, for me, this is Blizzard's first big flop is Kata. I think there were certain aspects of it that were okay. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't good in Kata, and a lot of people quit in Kata. Let's find the WoW player numbers graph. So this is the WoW player numbers. So like Kata, it pretty much declined the entirety of it until MOP pre-patch. This is probably MOP pre-patch around here, right? And we declined from nearly 12.5 mil to probably around 9. So that's a pretty big hit. Now, I guess you can also say, oh yeah, well, people have been playing WoW for a while. The curve is already slowing in Wrath. Like it's bound to happen eventually, but like this isn't a curve anymore, right? This is a big drop off. You know, if we see a curve coming down to like here, okay, I say all right, maybe, but this is like clearly people are actively quitting when you look at that, right? So I think Kata is for me the first big failure of Blizzard. It's the first time WoW wasn't attracting more players, and I think each expansion should be attracting more players, not driving them away. And obviously that coincidentally comes right after Activision takes over, right? So not great. So I think for me, already here, or even slightly before, you know, if they're talking about what marks the decline of Blizzard, I think already it's here. Like he was saying about Heroes of the Heroes of the Storm. Well, I mean, is that even on here? Yeah, Heroes of the Storm 2015. I think it's a lot earlier than that. I think it's already over here. The decline that comes in. I think Overwatch is completely made for the wrong reasons. And I think that they realize that, you know, I think they realize that honestly, like towards the end of Wrath. Maybe later, maybe in Kata. They realize it too late, right? They realize that esports is starting to be a big thing. It's not going anywhere. Twitch is huge, you know, and people are getting all of this fucking revenue and they're not getting shit. So then they like, fuck, how do we get a piece of this pie? Oh, we'll make Overwatch League. So they make Overwatch. They make a game that's intended to be an esport before it's even made, right? If you look at every fucking other esport, they become esports because they're good games and people love to play them. And Overwatch is the reverse, right? They made it a game because they wanted to make an esport game to milk. So, you know, it's already doomed, right? With that mindset to make a game, I think it's already doomed from the start. Hearthstone was decent, I guess. You could say Hearthstone was a success. I think Hearthstone's overall a success. We've got StarCraft 2. When did StarCraft 2 drop? I don't even know where StarCraft 2 dropped. When did StarCraft 2 come out? We've got Heart of the Swarm here. Is it even on here? It's not even on here, is it? Where's Wings of Liberty? It's not on here. 2015? There's no way. Look, this is 2013 for Heart of the Swarm. Legacy of the Void was 2015. July 2010. Okay, so it was around Kata time for Wings of Liberty around here. They just forgot to put it on. But also, like, look at their game timeline here. Like, they take their time with each thing. They separate it out nicely. There's no big overlaps. Look at this over here. They're kind of just, like, milking at this point, you know? Like, StarCraft Remastered. Fucking, they did Warcraft 3 Remastered, which was a shit show. StarCraft Remastered wasn't bad, but there's just not enough of an audience for it to ever be huge, right? Anymore, it's just too old of a game. And this was kind of a nice little, I guess, tip of the hat to all the old StarCraft players, I think, if anything. It's more of a passion project, I would say. So I've got nothing against that. All of the StarCraft 2 expansions, I don't actually think StarCraft 2 really improved in terms of how popular it was after Wings of Liberty, right? It kind of went downhill, but that's also because you had things like League of Legends and Dota taking away from them, right? And that's happening from like here to Heroes of the Storm coming out in 2015, right? That's 4 years of other MOBAs growing and Blizzard being late to the party. When we think about like Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne, right? When did Dota actually come out, the first one? It must have been pretty early on, like 2004, probably. When did Dota 1 come out? 2003 already, even. The Dota 1. So, like, really early on. Obviously, it was a custom game in Warcraft 3. So, they've got 10 years plus 12 years, right? Before they make their own MOBA. Dota 2 was what, 2013 here? When did League of Legends come out? League of Legends 2009. I guess Dota 2 was earlier from the beta, right? It was in beta for a while, I remember. So 2009, which is like probably around here, right? You've already got League coming out. League starting to build. It starts off slow. Wings of Liberty 2011. And obviously, people have been waiting for StarCraft 2 for fucking 10 years or whatever. Brood Wars 1998, so over 10 years. So obviously, it's an instant grab of players. And it actually was really fun. It was good. There was things that were wrong with it for sure, but it was decent. Yeah, here this was a big thing. This was a big meme. Like this is what StarCraft have, right? And this is what StarCraft 2 had. And it's just like so many things. I can link it if you want, but it's just like I'm not going to go through all of them individually, but it's just a crazy amount of stuff. Like LAN, no. Like, what are you doing? How is there not a LAN mode for your esport game, or game that has a very good chance of being an esport? Because Brood War was the biggest esport in the world for God knows how long. And then you launch your game without a LAN mode, and then tournaments get DDoSed. Facebook integration, yes. It's just insane, right? It's actually insane. And that's such, like, that's in 2011, right? So we've had, what, 3 years since Activision took over? Already showing, they're showing their hand there with that one, honestly, for me. And that's 3 years on from when Activision takes over. And already at that point, the new business model is in place, and the ship is sinking for me. So it's no surprise that Cataclysm is a massive flop. Lots of wrong takes from them in that regard. So yeah, honestly, I'd say their peak is Wrath of the Lich King. And I think that Wrath of the Lich King peaks, but it's already going downhill as the expansion progresses. So yeah, for me, I pinpoint the moment Activision takes over, that's the peak, that's the decline for me. And it just gets revealed more and more with the things that come out. Diablo 3 was okay. There was a lot of wrong with it as well. And then we're getting shit like fucking WoD and just, yeah. But yeah, it's insane that the player base, the WoW subscriptions actually is a really good visual diagram of the downfall of Blizzard as well. Like for the time, so it's a very good, actually. We'll just bring it on over again. Like if you look at the timing of it, it pretty much accurately represents the sinking ship. So yeah, I agree that. I actually don't agree with him. He says that for him, Heroes of the Storm is the first time you can see cracks in the armor. Honestly, as a WoW player, you see it as early as WoW Kata, like clearly. Just by the way that Blizzard was neglecting certain aspects of the game, the way that they approached stuff, the way that they ignored player base, didn't fix key things for months on end. Same issue with StarCraft. It was actually really sad. Like you would speak to a lot of the StarCraft pros, right? The StarCraft 2 pros, and this would be like towards the end of Wings of Liberty already, but they would be up in arms because there'd be so many things that were wrong and really clearly stated by the pro player base, and Blizzard would just be straight up ignoring them, often just like stone cold, like no communication whatsoever. And they'd be like, what the hell is this? Like, they'd come from other RTS games or whatnot, and they just weren't used to it at all, right? The way that Blizzard treats the players and the games. And they were just like, what the fuck is this? Like, and I was just like already used to it from like however many years of WoW, and I was just like, welcome to the party, boys. Like, just I genuinely felt bad for them. So it's not like it was just an isolated way that they treated WoW players. It's literally just all of their games. So yeah. Very sad stuff.
So the question of like when Blizzard, like when its reputation started to be tarnished, that to me is a little bit different than the question of when Blizzard actually started to fall.
I just went on a really long tangent. Sorry, boys.
When Blizzard actually started to fall is November of 2004, when Blizzard released a game called World of Warcraft.
Oh, interesting.
Leading up until World of Warcraft, Blizzard was this hit machine that released Warcraft, Warcraft 2, Diablo
That's an
2,
interesting take. I want to see where he goes with this.
3, et cetera, et cetera. Because like all these games,
even earlier than I said,
or every couple of years, they released a new box product, and it would come out, and each one would be bigger than the last. Then in 2004, Blizzard releases World of Warcraft, and it is astronomically successful. Like the lead designer and co-founder of the company, Alan Adham, believes that they are going to, like, his wild estimation is like, we're going to reach 1 million subscribers in a year. And instead, they reach 5 million subscribers in a year.
That's
the company
crazy.
goes from hundreds of people to thousands
Right.
of people. They suddenly essentially paused development on Diablo 3 and StarCraft 2 because all those people have to start working on World of
Oh
Warcraft.
yeah, dude. I mean, in your book, you talk about
Oh, I
so
didn't
many
know that.
times
That's
where
crazy.
The higher ups.
That's
are
why
like, "Don't
StarCraft 2
work
took so fucking long. I don't even know where the timeline's gone now, but yeah, that's
come to
crazy. I didn't
WoW."
know that.
They just kept pulling people off of these projects and saying the money maker is yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like we have this situation where like
See, I
this
don't
company-
think that's the right way to approach it even. Like, you've got these people that are passionate about these other games that they're working on, and then you just tear them away from that and say, no, you go work on WoW now. Like, I feel like that would piss me off. Like, not to the point where I'd be like raging and livid and whatnot about it, but I wouldn't have a good feeling about it. You know, you wouldn't have as much love for the game as you did with the game that you're actually
I've written
passionate about
before. I
making.
wrote an article about the for the Atlantic about like the curse of success, and World of Warcraft to me is the kind of the quintessential example of that, of this game that just like turned the company into something else entirely. And for a lot of people, it was good. I mean, they were making money. A lot of people, it was lucrative. A lot of people benefited from that. A lot of people.
I think they just didn't grow in the right way, right? They didn't maintain the values that they had before WoW after growing because of WoW. So like whoever was in charge of that, you know, steering that ship made the wrong decisions along the way. At least some of them.
Enjoyed the game. Obviously, World of Warcraft brought so many people together, brought together spouses and like lifelong friends, and like did all these great things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a bad game. There's a great quote in the book from this guy Sean Carnes who said, when millions turn into billions, everything changes. And they were able to get out a couple other incubation projects, and obviously they did come out with StarCraft 2 and Diablo 3 and Hearthstone, but WoW just kind of irreversibly changed the nature of the company. Suddenly it was making games that were not just like one-time releases, but forever games. World of Warcraft, Diablo 4, Overwatch, like Hearthstone, those are all forever games. Those are not games that just kind of like...
I wouldn't call Overwatch a forever game.
You know what I mean, though. You know what I mean. It's a game that just like, you keep churning out stuff for it. So like, it's live service games. World of Warcraft really transformed Blizzard into something else entirely. My point here is not to take away from that, like, or take away from the quality of the game, but Blizzard without World of Warcraft would have been on a very different trajectory.
Oh yeah. Speaking of that, again, you tell the whole story of Blizzard being passed around like a hot potato.
I actually wonder if they'd grown to the size they are now, but slower, without WoW like fucking putting them on steroids, would it have been healthier as a whole? I genuinely wonder.
People that owned the company. But the one everyone knows is Activision, where Activision sort of merged with Blizzard.
I wondered when they were going to talk about
this. They
this.
became this juggernaut. And the person they know, and perhaps ascribe a lot of the problems to, is Bobby Kotick. So Bobby Kotick of
What a
Activision
douchebag
becomes
that guy
like this
was.
mythical evil figure that is like the reason Blizzard went wrong. He is the money guy. Is it more complicated than that? How much blame would you put on Bobby Kotick? Is Bobby Kotick a hero or villain to you, or where does he fall?
In this case, I mean, Bobby Kotick is a fascinating dude to me. I mean, he is, like you mentioned, like growth is his obsession. There's no secret to him. He is not a subtle guy. He is like capitalism personified.
When you saw the Activision people's quotes in these books, it's like, we are selling slop.
He wasn't there for the game. He was there for the money. It was a business for him and nothing more.
Eaters. We are like, we don't play the games. We don't care. We could be selling diapers. We could be selling cereal. We're just going to make a product. We need to make another one every year. It's so interesting. They did not hide it at all. I almost respected it.
Eat your slop. Eat your slop, Matriarch. Eat your slop.
I almost respected the honesty rather than pretending like they cared about it. It was just funny to me.
Activision merges with Vivendi Games in 2007 to form Activision Blizzard. And it's really interesting because things go well for a few years, but at a certain point, it's clear that they're like oil and water in terms of values, because Blizzard is a company that
this is what we were talking about
very
before,
strongly
right?
in like
the values change
first,
and you
like,
can feel that.
when it's ready is their mantra. Like, we'll release games when they're ready. And Activision is the complete opposite. Activision is marketing first, commercial org first. Like, we will release Call of Duty every single fall, no matter what. We will release a game every.
I feel like Activision is the result of. Fuck, what was that video? Let me find it. It's Some fucking Steve Jobs interview. Wait, Steve. Fuck, what's it called? Okay, this is like a 2-minute video. This is super interesting, by the way.
Something else.
So they were very skillful.
This is for me. This
But
is
they
like
did show us.
Yeah.
this is what happens when this happens to like a company, like a games company or whatever. You get Activision at the end.
So,
Or near
and it's
the
good
end.
that they showed us because
This is where it
the
comes
technology
from.
crashed and burned at Xerox. And
What?
they used to call the, what's that?
No, I was just.
Why?
Yeah, why?
Oh, I actually thought a lot about that, and I learned more about that with John Scully later on, and I think I understand it now pretty well. What happens is, like with John Scully, John came from PepsiCo, and they at most would change their product, once every 10 years. I mean, to them, a new product was like a new size bottle, right? So if you were a product person, you couldn't change the course of that company very much. So who influenced the success of PepsiCo? The sales and marketing people. Therefore, they were the ones that got promoted, and therefore they were the ones that ran the company. Well, for PepsiCo, that might have been okay, but it turns out the same thing can happen in technology companies that get monopolies, like, IBM and Xerox. If you were a product person at IBM or Xerox, so you make a better copy or a better computer. So what? When you have a monopoly market share, the company's not any more successful. So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people. And
I think this is a little bit different in games companies because you can make a banger game, right? But I think it's a lot more. And then this was where the Activision ideology came from, right? It's a lot easier to sell out and make a store mount, let's say, as an example, than spend a lot more time, work, money, development on making a banger game that might not pop off,
end up running the companies. And the product people get driven out of the decision-making forums. And the companies forget what it means to make great products. Sort of the product sensibility and the product genius that brought them to that monopolistic position gets rotted out by people running these companies who have no conception of a good product versus a bad product. They have no conception of the craftsmanship that's required to take a good idea and turn it into a good product. And they really have no feeling in their hearts, usually, about wanting to really help the customers. So that's what happened at Xerox. The
They just
people at
don't
Xerox
care
Park
about the
used to
game
call the
anymore,
people that ran Xerox toner heads.
Brackets Bobby Kotick.
And they just
right?
and these toner heads would come out to Xerox Park, and they just had no clue about what they were seeing.
And for our audience, toner is what?
Oh, toner is what you put into a copier. Yeah, the toner that you add to an industrial copier.
The black stuff.
The black stuff, yeah. So basically they were copier heads that just had no clue about a computer or what it could do. And so they just grabbed defeat from the greatest victory in the computer industry. Xerox could have owned the entire computer industry today. Could have been, a company 10 times its size. Could have been IBM. Could have been the IBM of the 90s. Could have been the Microsoft of the 90s. So, but anyway, that's all ancient history. It doesn't really matter anymore.
Sure.
I love how I just disregard them. Yeah, just it's so insane how that applies so much to what we see now with Blizzard. This is why I was saying, like, I genuinely think Blizzard is either going to be gone or a mobile game dev in the next, 10 years or something. Because this exact thing is the feeling you get when you play Blizzard games.
Once
now,
we
right?
identify a hit franchise, Bobby's word is
I think WoW
exploit.
Classic actually, and the Classic team is one of the one things I would say I don't get that feeling from as much these days compared to like all of the other WoW shit all of the other Blizzard stuff that comes out.
Like we will exploit that franchise.
No,
So, yeah,
I mean, you
it's
talked about. I
really-
just want to give people examples so they tie it in. You know, Activision was the one who got hold of Tony Hawk and said we have to put out a 50 new Tony Hawk games in 5 years and run it into the ground. They got a hold of Guitar Hero. You know, Guitar Hero has this big spike of success. We're like, all right, we need 40 new. Yeah, there was a quote that shocked me in your book. I think it was Bobby Kotick talking to the Guitar Hero team, and they're like, okay, we can get out a new Guitar Hero every year. And he's like, that is way too slow. We need a new one every quarter. We need a new one every 2 weeks. And he wasn't joking. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
But like,
crazy.
like if you're an Activision, if you're someone who's an executive at Activision, you look over at Blizzard and you say, okay, great. You guys think games are art, like taking all the time you need. Okay, fantastic. But like, you guys just took 7 years to like incubate a game and nothing has happened from it. So like, who do you think is paying the bills for you while you do that? So like there's different perspectives on this, and I think that like the real tragedy here, the tragedy of the latter years of Blizzard, at least from a business standpoint, is the inability of both sides to find room in the middle and to find like a spot of compromise.
I don't think it was ever that. It was like, it felt like the Blizzard side that really wanted to like, you know, release it when it's ready, make good games from the heart, always just got overruled by Activision. That's kind of how it feels, at least as a player. There was level 58 boost in TBC Classic installments. Oh no, yeah, for sure. There was definitely
So
some
Activision
stuff
essentially, they
where they
saw
kind
the-
of got overruled, as I said, and they were like, you have to do this, you have to, you know, make more money, blah blah blah, for sure. But they're not doing that because they love the game, right? They're not putting those things in because they love the game that they're making or working on. They're putting those in because they've been told to put those in. And then they just, and then players obviously respond badly to it because they don't want that shit in the game. And who's deciding it? Probably fucking Activision, let's be honest. And then everyone's spit spamming everyone that buys one of them. Rightly so, fuck them. And then spit spam gets
Blizzard to
disabled.
hire
like,
this chief financial officer.
Oh, is this
and
that's the solution.
Armin Zerza. And Armin Zerza is a guy who came from Procter and Gamble, like
Crazy
soap
stuff.
and diapers and shampoo, and like he knew how to ship products. He eventually becomes chief operating officer of the company. So super powerful at Blizzard, and he's clearly like an Activision-minded guy who is bringing that ethos to Blizzard, and that causes all sorts of problems for people internally. And if you ask Blizzard people, they'll all be like, oh, it's Bobby Kotick's fault, we can never find a compromise. And if you ask the Activision people, they'll be like, oh, it's Mike Morhaim's fault, they refuse to listen to us, they refuse to make any compromises. These two extremely strong-willed, like stubborn factions that I feel like really just could not find a way to work together.
F in the chat for
of
Mike
course,
Morhaim.
Just when it seemed like
The goat.
Activision was winning or going to win, California lawsuit hit and shit hit the fan, and soon enough Microsoft was in charge instead. So nobody really won at the end of that whole business battle.
You say there's no heroes and villains, and I think that's a good thing for a journalist to say, and I think that it shows you have both sides in your book. However, reading this, it is so hard not to think of the guy you mentioned, Armin Zerza, as a villain.
With Armin,
Is he the diapers guy?
He's a character for sure. It's funny, he's like he's got this thick Austrian accent, so like Blizzard employees would joke that he sounded like a James Bond villain, but but I think he's more like a Game of Thrones character. I'll leave it to
The way
I'll
he
leave
like
it to readers to figure out
backstabbed his
who.
way up the ladder. It was just fascinating. I want to push back a little bit. So you said
Please.
that it's not all bad. And I agree. There's plenty of interesting, good parts of this book. You go through all these different eras of Blizzard from the early days to now with Microsoft acquisition. In my mind, I had this image of Blizzard as like everything was perfect. It was this group of people that super loved gaming, super passionate. They make these great games from my childhood, Warcraft, StarCraft, and it's all hits and everything's smooth up until about, recently. Then they have some high-profile failure games. They have the lawsuits and things go wrong. And But as I read this book, what struck me right off the bat was like how chaotic it was from the very early days. Like you reveal in this book, I didn't know this. They were owned by an educational software company. They changed hands a bunch of times. They would work insane hours to put out StarCraft or Warcraft, and then the game would release, sell millions of copies, and they wouldn't get paid. I'm interested, what was your POV going in? Was it similar to mine? Was this a surprise to you, or how did you?
So it never surprises me to hear a video game company like is secretly turbulent and full of chaos behind the scenes. But like the extent of the details, some of the stories surprised me. The actual nitty gritty of it all surprised me.
Yeah, the guy that wrote the Martian, Andy Weir, he is in this book as a Blizzard employee who was just like totally harassed for not doing crunch.
So he worked on the launcher for the game. He wanted to go away for a weekend. He got a bunch of shit, even just for leaving for the weekend. But he also got a bunch of shit because he wasn't like great at it. Blizzard in 1995, when Andy Weir was there, it was this atmosphere where nobody really knew what they were doing.
As I was reading the book, I got so many flashbacks of like the early era of Twitch as it was starting, you know, working inside that as it was blowing up and then Amazon bought it. And there was a part, you know, I underlined a bunch of things in this book and I realized I have no way to find what I underlined, so it doesn't help me at all. I remember the line basically, you said, it was a Blizzard employee basically saying that the only way to rise up at the company was to like go out in Vegas and like party with the higher ups. And I distinctly remember that feeling at Twitch. Like in the early days, there would just be people that were in this kind of bro culture at the top. And if you didn't go out drinking and partying and like gambling, and like there's no way you were getting noticed to get bigger projects or moving up.
Yeah, it's just like a classic tech and gaming thing. And I think like it can suck to be like a dude who's trying to.
It kind of felt like that bit in OnlyFans.
But it really sucks being a woman because you can't.
Like it was just a shouting match, especially at the start. It was just like a shouting match to try and get noticed and get exposure. Right? It's the same fucking shit, I swear.
Work at a lot of these male-dominated companies. It can be really a struggle. Even if you're not, like, some of these companies, including Blizzard, have issues with, like, blatant sexual harassment and discrimination and misconduct, and that sort of stuff is heinous, obviously. But even more subtly and more systemic and much more common is that idea of, like, it being this boys' club at the very top, and you can't even, like, there's no path
There's no
to
avenue.
success.
Yeah. I wanted to zoom out a bit. There's a lot of questions I have about Blizzard, but I was hoping to open a little bit more with, I wanted to get your high level thoughts on the gaming industry as a whole right now, because it's such an interesting time. You know, if you ask some people, they'll say there's layoffs everywhere, it's chaos, it's the industry is dying or dead, it's a total, you know, crapshoot, don't go into it, avoid at all costs. And then you've asked other people, it's like it's never been better, this is like the greatest time in gaming history, we have tons of new games. Like where do you land? What is your POV on the gaming industry in 2024?
Yeah, it's
I just saw that meme too.
This crazy Concord news.
I saw
today.
that.
I'm sure you saw that. Man, wild. For people who didn't see, Sony shut down Firewalk Studios, which is a company that made Concord, which is a game that was such a flop that Sony like pulled it from release less than 2 weeks after it came out. As far as like the overall industry, I would say that from a gamer's perspective, I feel like I am constantly like inundated with cool things to play. Right now, I'm like juggling so many cool, like I have Metaphor Refantasia, which I've been spending so many hours in. There's like a sequel to Case of the Golden Idol coming out, which is one of my favorite games. I'm super stoked about that. There are just so many good games to play. Like this year has been full of bangers.
I feel like
from an industry,
from my POV, with regards to that, I just don't like, there's so many games I want to play that come out and I just don't have the time. Like I literally do not have the time to play all of the games that I want to play. And that, to be fair, that's mostly because I'm streaming WoW all the fucking time. So I don't know how I would feel if I actually had the time to play like other games. Like if I could just stream other games 10 hours every day, would I still have enough games to play that are good? I don't know. I still haven't finished bloody Baldur's Gate 3. Right, I'm about halfway through approx, but like I still haven't finished that, and that's kind of like my next one on the list. Is I still want to play Cyberpunk, haven't played that yet. Waiting room for Riot MMO, yeah. If that ever comes out,
not imagine.
Honestly, like the fact that what's his face left, Ghostcrawler left, right? So and then they said that we're gonna restart. They were like restarting the whole project or something. It was just like, you could try and stream some of them. I can't, Sinostro, mate. I need to eat, bro.
That like a friend or family member joined the video game industry. It just seems so bleak. And one of the reasons for that is this glut
at the moment, 1 day a week's
because it's so
horror
hard
stream
to stand
is
out on the market.
pretty much
there are other problems too.
all I can
Another problem is that like so
afford.
many people are, in addition to all of these cool new games that are constantly coming out, are playing the old games like Fortnite, GTA Online.
I mean, they're now decades old, some of these games, and they still have just the insane vice grip on live service. I mean, it feels like, especially devs that are trying to get into live service, have been hit the wall of Fortnite, Counter-Strike, Dota, Valorant, League of
It's-
Legends. But like
it's
these games
tough,
that are just
man, getting
this
into that.
ironclad in their top spot for years and
Yeah.
years and years and years.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's like games that come out today don't just have to compete with like the other big games that are coming out on the market like this week, this month, this year, but also the games that came out 5
Yeah, I
years
mean, we could do Cyberpunk next. It's not a bad shout, Sinastra, honestly. I might do that.
ago. Like that was unheard
On
of
Saturdays.
even a decade ago. And Fortnite especially, Fortnite has really become like the hangout space for a lot of people in like that kind of, I guess, Gen Alpha, like teenage years.
That's an interesting thing you bring up because it feels like not just Fortnite, but Fortnite and Roblox. Maybe Fortnite a little older and Roblox a little younger, but they've become like, I don't know the right word for it, but like meta games where they have these tools where you can remake almost every popular game in them. And so there's no reason for someone to leave Fortnite or the Roblox world when they can
Smart.
play 600 new games a day.
Having
for
like a
free in
lobby
the
that you can hang out in as well and just chat to people. I don't know if you can do that in Fortnite and Roblox, but just like having this area, it's almost like the flipping metaverse, right? Like having that area where you can just hang out and chill and talk to people without actually having to participate in any sort of game.
game
Kind of a
itself.
big deal,
I mean,
isn't it?
I don't know if you've ever explored some of the stores there, but they have like straight rip duplicates of almost every popular gaming, and it's completely unexplored and undersued. I think, which is crazy. I think they're due
Yeah,
for a really
literally
big
like
lawsuit.
Duratar,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not really sure.
Kind
like,
of.
if I'm a video game company trying to come out with a new game today, man, marketing is like, I don't know. You tell me, what are the marketing tricks? How do you even get people to notice you?
It's so interesting. I have.
You just
been
gotta
thinking
try and
about
go
this
viral,
lately,
haven't you?
And what's interesting is from the consumer POV, though, you could argue that it's never been a better time, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so, as you mentioned, there's so much good stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Lethal Company, that game that came out and really it sold. I don't know. I think they did 50 million. Did crazy. It's a total solo dev. And that guy is a 17-year-old furry who learned everything from being a Roblox dev. He just grew up playing Roblox as a kid.
That's
He learned how
crazy.
to be a game dev. He launched his own game, Lethal Company, and it's outperforming AAA games. You know, it feels like this is an era of indie and solo devs kind of striking back because the dev costs have gone down so much. You can use the internet to find an artist, or you can do it all so much cheaper. And so maybe it's just a reshifting away from these big, massive AAA, huge studios because they just can't guarantee the money anymore. You know, it's kind of like Hollywood, what's happening.
Yeah,
I think it's
100%.
kind of like this is what I was saying more earlier, right? It's like there's more of a gamble into spending time and money on something that is sort of a big game in case it doesn't pop off and then you lose money. Whereas these indie devs are like just basically have such low costs, they just put out something average, but just the actual gameplay is very fun. They're just way less, it's just like way less polished, right? Because it's like one dude in this case making it. But because the gameplay is fun, people play it. And then some things are just chance, right? If it happens to pop off, if some random big streamer happens to give it a go, whatever, you know, then it just snowballs, right? And that's where the hype comes from. So it's like this kind of alternate route to the top compared to, you know, your traditional make big game, market big game with all these upfront costs, and then game does well and then get rewards. It's more like have low cost, roll the fucking dice. Maybe it pops off, if not, no biggie sort of thing, right? You can make 10 games like that and one of them could pop off. But I think that a lot of the AAA games, they get lost along the way, right? They a lot of the time, they're almost making a game for the sake of it, right? The people at the top, without any sort of, the out of touch ones that aren't really in it for the actual love of the games, they're like, okay, we need to make a game, we need to do this, we need to do that. But the game actually isn't, the core of the game actually isn't fun to play. It's just this shit covered in loads of shiny effects and good graphics and potentially good engine. Sometimes not even, which is another gripe of mine. When you go and make an MMO, for the love of God, please make it fluid to play. If it's not going to be, if it doesn't feel good to move your character around, people are going to quit the game. They're going to feel too much. It's passively going to feel too it's gonna feel like there's too much effort going into it to even move your character around. It's not gonna be fun. So like, please, for the love of God, I don't know how that still keeps getting fucked up,
And
but
I
every
think that
single
can be
time
a
it
really
just
good thing.
makes a
You
game
look at
die
game
on
like
launch.
Balatro or Animal Well. Both were made by single person, which means they are both super cheap to make compared
Yeah.
to these AAA extravaganzas. And as a result, and here's the important part, they can take huge risks. And so, like, a game like Balatro, no AAA game would ever make that. A game like Animal Well, no AAA studio would ever make that. Like, in Animal Well, some of the secrets are impossible to find. Like, some of the secrets will never be found unless you work together with people on a Discord or, like, look it up or something like that.
Right.
So these are games that
That's
like
cool.
no Ubisoft or EA or Take-Two would ever allow to be published because they're too risky. The people who actually made them don't need to sell 10 million copies to break even. They might just be thrilled with like 50,000 or 100,000 copies. Balatro, there was a chance that nobody would have ever noticed.
Right,
that.
you can get lost in the 50,000 games released a day. You know, Animal Well is an interesting example if we're going to talk about marketing and gaming.
We could play
because
that on stream,
do
by the way.
think
That came Balatro. If people want to watch it, I'm down to give that shit a go as
one
well at some
area
point.
is content creators and influencers, and
Oh,
the
yeah,
way
Donkey,
Animal Well
yeah.
partnered with Donkey, it does feel like that's something that maybe the studios or the older studios are not adapting to as well as they. I guess they sort of have in recent.
so
It's so
Animal Well-
clear
so-
when companies just have people set in their ways that refuse to adapt to stuff. Like, it's so clear because things move so fast now.
Donkey actually, he started a company called Big Mud that actually published Animal Well.
This is
So
why companies
Animal
like
was-
Valve
was
just buy
quite
small
literally
projects
was
and make them big
published
later. Yeah,
by
true.
Donkey's
Razko.
company, not just, it wasn't just like a marketing partnership or something like
What was
that.
it? What was
which
it
I thought-
called? Portal before it was Portal. I remember seeing it and thinking, man, this looks cool. It was this. Wait. Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome to my let's play of a quick
I think it
little
was this
game for the
team.
Brett Both switches need to be pressed at the same time, so drop the box onto one of them and just stand on the other one.
It's insane. And then it's basically just this
Put a
polished,
portal
right?
Up there and walk out.
But it's the same team, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so this
They
game
made
is
it.
kind of buggy, and right there, the
Once talked to an indie dev who made his living scouring through niche Reddits, probing on game interest for their FAE. I mean, niches. Oh my god. He then produced low quality garbage aimed at that and made enough to pay the bills. That's crazy. Play the Sparrows is a cool battery.
It was brilliant.
I
When
think the
Donkey announced
simplicity
that he
has
was gonna
charm to it
publish
though, right?
games, I saw a bunch of people, like colleagues, peers, whatever. I saw people criticizing him and being like, "What does this like YouTuber know about publishing games? Just because he can criticize games doesn't mean he can publish them." And I tweeted something like, "Wait until all these people criticizing Donkey, like wait until they find out who's actually in charge of these video game companies, like people who worked at McKinsey for 5 years
they have
and
no
then,
they
like
haven't played a game
failed
in
their
their
way
life.
up."
You made a distinction between marketing and publishing, but it's so interesting, and this is my limited POV. In the modern day, that's like the main thing the publisher is bringing to the table. It's really easy to get set up on Steam and get your game out there so someone can buy it. It can get it all set up, and people aren't buying in stores anymore. You don't need all that logistics. So the publisher is what's bringing you is marketing. That's like their main value prop.
Well, I would say they have other value props. So a publisher, so funding is the biggest one for a lot of companies, for a lot of the either game studios that are like owned by a Ubisoft or an EA, or they have a publishing deal. A lot of times funding is the biggest one. But there's other stuff too. I mean, marketing is a big one for sure, but there's also like PR, which is a part of marketing, but not like it's a very different kind
Sure.
of, but also like stuff like certification, which is when you deal with the console manufacturers and you have to kind of go through their compliance testing to make sure you can actually get your game on PlayStation and Xbox. Or like distribution. If you're a solo indie developer, you might not know anybody at Steam, but like your publisher might have the contact who like knows how to help you out and troubleshoot if something goes wrong on your Steam page. So there's a lot of stuff like that, like kind of.
I feel like this is the
Yeah,
kind
so
of thing
I'm just sort of saying.
like that is gonna get phased out eventually. It's gonna all get streamlined. There's gonna be automated stuff for this, maybe even within things like Steam, and it's just gonna all get absorbed. It's like the middleman, right? That are just basically skimming off the top because they have the context or whatever already, or you need, like he said, the funding, things like that. It's I don't know.
Like in my experience, when we talking to some publishers through some stuff I've been working on, and
I think
that stuff feels like it's getting more and more. The word might be commodified. Like it's just you can pay money, you can get it done, but the one thing you can't do is get someone to care. You can't get attention. Attention's very hard to get on your game. I made a video when Donkey first announced. I really think
this is what I was talking about, hype, right?
Because
if you get the hype,
a million other publishers can get a million people the day.
If you get the hype, you can see it with some games. Some games they get hype and they do really well with it, right? They hijack it and they run with it and they manage to roll that hype into something even bigger. Whereas other games, they have the hype, they have their little hype phase, they don't, expand enough, build on it enough, fix things quick enough, and then the hype flops. And you basically can't get it back then. So it's like, I feel like something like Fall Guys is a good example of that. Where Fall Guys had this insane hype at the start, but then they were really slow to sort of adapt and capitalize on that, and then the hype just fell off. So yeah.
Of your launch to watch a video showing how great
I might
the
just
game
pause
is.
this and watch the rest tomorrow.
Power that is I think underrated by some of these older studios. That is becoming more and more obvious.
Yeah, you're 100% right, and I think that like the Activisions of the world are still a very old school. I mean, you look at Call of Duty. Call of Duty has a pretty strong marketing machine behind it, but a lot of their activations, a lot of their kind of infrastructure is built around TV commercials and a lot of traditional
older stuff,
marketing. And someone like Donkey, I mean, that's incredibly powerful, and it's 100% free, and it's a smart move. And I also think what is really smart about Donkey's approach is that like he's a guy who has built his entire brand, his entire career on being honest. And I think if he made a game and tried to show it on his platform, like it would be so obvious that like, and he would just lose trust forever. So like I think for him it was risky for him because it really had to be
if the game was a stinker, it would have been.
It's funny, there's a lot of parallels between book publishing and video game publishing, and one of them is that like in book publishing you really have to the author has to do all the marketing themselves, which is really interesting.
Are you in your 30s?
I'm 37 years old.
Okay, so I'm in my 30s too. You are what I think is extremely rare, which is someone who has survived a very long time in games journalism. Even more than game development, even more than games journalism is like an extremely, from my understanding, extremely difficult career to like to be a survivor a long time in. And so you've done that. I would love to know more about your thoughts on that. Like how did you do that? Why do you think you're an outlier? What is the way you survive? Like you have to go to different platforms.
Is there much more on Blizzard? Okay, so there is more Blizzard stuff. So actually, this is probably the part that I care about the least. But yeah, we'll probably pick this up again tomorrow. We've got like Overwatch League, Future of Esports, Blizzard versus Kesper, Microsoft acquisition, things cut from the boat you wish you left. Okay, so the second half is I feel like we've had a long portion here of stuff that's like not as interesting. But then the second half looks pretty good.